All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Asian Goalie Show. I'm your host, Felix. I'm also known as the Asian Goalie. The mission of this show is to create the most impactful platform for beer league goalies to learn, share, and collaborate. This Twitch channel is the one and only live channel where I collaborate with others and have live interactions with all of you. If you don't want to miss any future live experience, consider clicking that follow button there. And if you are watching this from YouTube, don't forget to click subscribe if you haven't done so. So, we are stepping into the third episode of the month where we continue to dive deep into the mental game we all play as beer league goalies. And just a little bit of a backstory. When I first moved to Canada and after I got like highly influenced by the ice hockey culture here, I had moments when I was very interested to knowing more how to get involved into the sports. Either I play it or just get closer to ice hockey. And that was when I was in my late high school year when all my peers who were playing the sports, they were like super competitive. And but I never get to understand like what they experience, how they go through their journey. I'm always curious about it, but they're just like in a different world. So in today's episode, I have our guest Taylor, who is actually a college goalie for the Newman University in Ashton, Pennsylvania, to share her mental journey moving through the AAA and college hockey circuit. So super excited to interview her to understand kind of some of what she's been going through in terms of mentally, physically, team, right? What has been really interesting stories that she could share with us. So before we introduce her to the show, just remind everybody this is an Ask Me Anything environment, meaning that if you have any questions or comments for me or Taylor, please put them in the chat and let us know. And also, I have a big announcement that I want to make at the end of this show. So stay until the end of the show if you don't want to miss it. Hello, Taylor. How are you doing?
Hey, great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for joining us. You you told me before the show we delayed a 1 hour of the show because you have a game. But what happened to that? Tell us about it.
So we actually got our game is actually tomorrow on Sunday, and
Right.
unfortunately it got canceled because of the other team and COVID protocols because a bunch of them are under like the COVID watch. They don't have enough players.
Got it. Got it. So, man, COVID, like it's been killing me as well. Like I want to go back to the ice, but I can't even get on the ice. Like I don't have all the tests and all this stuff. But going back to your stories, I want to first start at the questions of how did you get into playing ice hockey from the start? Like how did you get started with the sports?
So just from like the start, a couple of people on my dad's side grew up playing ice hockey a little bit. Like my dad started kind of late and he played club hockey at Westchester University, which is in Pennsylvania. It's in like my hometown. And
Mm-hmm.
he kind of took a long time off and then he got back into it when I was like really little and he got us into skating. And I wasn't really a big fan of that at first. And I also have a twin sister. And I think some of it
Oh,
was she also wasn't a real big fan of it either. And we kind of like feed into each other's energy. That's totally like a twin thing, really common. And then I started playing out a little bit. Like I learned to play hockey a little bit. And I wasn't really enjoying it, but I liked going to the games, like the pro games. So I was at a Philadelphia Flyers game, and I remember we were sitting pretty close to the goalie, and I was like, they look really cool. Like that looks really, really cool. I want to try that. My dad was like, yeah, yeah, sure. Like, sure, you want to do that. And he really didn't want me to do it. I can kind of understand why he didn't want me to do it, but at the time I was just like, come on, like I want to try. So then there was actually a goalie coach about 5 minutes up the road from my house. He had a synthetic ice studio. It's closed down now. It's been closed for a couple of years, but I remember the first time I went in there, you walk in and there's like a narrow hallway that's all filled with like goalie gear just lining up that hallway along with like pictures. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And you go downstairs and that's where the actual like synthetic ice is. And I got put into a lot of really old, like used gear, and I tried it on and I tried stepping out on that synthetic ice. And that was my first time out there. I had never like been on that kind of ice. So I was like just waddling my way towards the net or even in the gear. And after the session, my dad was like, so what do you think? And I was like, I loved it. Like my eyes just like lit up apparently. That was when I was like 10 years old, so I don't remember it that well, but just from like the story, I kind of remember it a good bit.
That was really cool. I'm curious about the family dynamic that you have. So you have a twin, and
Mm-hmm.
does she is a she, right? I suppose a
Yeah,
sister.
she, yeah.
Yeah. So does she also play hockey as well, or it's just you?
She used to, like when we were in middle school, we were on the same middle school team together, and that was a boys team, mostly boys, and then girls were allowed to join. So we played like on that team together. And then I kind of moved up like throughout, like I also played like travel hockey. And in eighth grade, I also got moved up to the junior varsity high school team because they needed a goalie. And at the time, like I was in like that last class that was able to do it. Like if you needed a goalie, and if your goalie was in eighth grade, they were allowed to move up to JV. Like they couldn't play varsity, but they could play JV. So me and her kind of had like this little disconnect. Like in like hockey, we weren't playing as much like up at that point. And once we got to high school, she didn't want to play like with the high school boys because they're like a lot bigger. Like they're at that point where they can like start hitting you. Even in like JV, it can get like really rough, especially there. Like some of the guys aren't as good, so they don't really know how to hit, and like they're not as controlled. And especially like being a girl in that environment, like as
Right.
a goalie, it's different. But she was a defenseman, so she didn't really want to be in that. And then she also just didn't want to play travel. It was too much of a commitment. She wasn't that invested in it, so she stopped playing. But she excels at a lot of other things. Like she's really smart, and she's also a classically trained singer now. She got into that like in high school, so she does like performances and stuff like that. And she can sing like opera like way better than I could ever sing. Like I'm terrible compared to her. Yeah.
That that's cool. You mentioned JV a couple of times. Correct me, but like what is JV means? What does that mean?
My bad. I know not everyone uses like the same like acronyms and stuff like that, but so there's junior varsity, which is JV, and then there's varsity. So
Ah, okay,
for
okay.
high school, that's just like the two teams. Like varsity is the higher level, and then junior varsity is like the lower level. Like kind of like if you want to start out there, or like say your varsity team is really, really good, you can
Mm.
still be a really good player, but you might not get as much time at varsity. So you go back and forth between both, or you could be like straight varsity. That's what I did throughout my career. I was on the varsity team and I played like for varsity, but I was also like mostly the main goalie on junior varsity because we had two goalies on varsity, and then JV, it was really just me. There wasn't anybody else on top of like my club teams that I played for growing up as well, which are different. Like that's like travel, like double A. Well, they changed it now. Like it's all like double A, triple A. It used to be just like for girls, tier one and tier two.
And when you were playing at that level, are girls separate from the boys, or are they pretty mixed up at that point?
Um, so my so on my high school teams, it was boys teams. So I was the only girl on my teams up until my senior year. There was one girl that kind of bounced between. There was a girls team that they implemented, but I wanted to stay with the boys because that was like the team I had grown up playing with. And
Mm.
in high school too, like high school around here, high school girls hockey is a little different. It's more so it's more meant toward for girls that are like just starting out, and they don't have to put in all that money and time into like low level travel hockey. They can just like go there and they can play, and it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot less time consuming, and they can really like learn how to play. So for me, I was a triple A goalie at that point, so I was kind of like, I don't know if I should be here. Like I think, other girls should be getting these opportunities. Like if they want to learn how to play goalie, like I'm not going to come in and try and like do that. Like I have my teams. That's what I'm gonna stick with is my teams.
So that mindset that you have of like, should I even be here? Is that coming from like you belong to a lot of different teams, or you're like, wait, like I already be like that opportunity should give to others, or is that something else that triggered that thoughts?
So, well, I mean, part of it, I mean, it was a little bit back then, it was a little bit ego. I was like, well, this is like a starting league. This is like a starting out league. I'm like like in girls hockey, I play AAA, and this is like considered like, A, B level hockey. Like I've seen girls that have played on like their, like some girls I played with or against, they'll go down and play with their girls' high school teams, and they'll just be like skating circles around everyone. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, like that kind of rubs me off the wrong way a little bit sometimes. Like, what are you doing here? Like, just for a little extra ice? Like, I guess that's fine, but like, leave this like for the girls that are learning and, want to like really excel. Like, I don't see the point in basically being somebody way like tons of levels above somebody else. Like, to me, that's just, I don't know, that's like not really being fair. Like, we have our competitive teams, let them have like their competitive teams, and people at like their level is, I guess, is kind of what I mean by that.
Got it, got it. So going back to what you said, you used to have a team where you were the only lady within the group. What was that dynamic looks like in the dressing room or in the game dynamic? Like, do you feel like there is some sort of weirdness, or it's
So
like it's just you're just another player, right?
in high school it was definitely weird. Like for my travel teams, it was all girls, so that was like a whole nother thing. Like, I was in the locker room, I was like best friends with some of these girls. Some of these girls were like,
Yeah,
I considered like some of my best friends. Like a lot of us kind of don't like talk as much anymore, but that's just like growing up, going down different paths. And with the boys, I always was like in like another room. So in our home rink there was locker room 10, and that was like the designated girls locker room. It was a pretty big locker room. As far as like girls only locker rooms go, nicest one I've ever been in. And then sometimes like we'd go to other rinks. I'd be in party rooms, like where they host birthday parties. I'd have to get dressed in bathrooms or in the hallway. And right now too, on my team, like I used to play women's college hockey, but this is a men's team now. Like this is men's ACHA Division 2. Sorry, I don't think I made that clear to you before, but so now I'm the only girl on this team as well. And it's definitely a lot different of a dynamic. I'm still separate in that aspect, but like in high school, everyone's kind of growing up, maturing. I don't think a lot of people knew how to like kind of react to a girl being there. And I don't know if like people were kind of like awkward, back in high school, and some of them were especially awkward like towards girls. But now with my team now, it's a lot different. Like I'm actually like friends with these guys. Like I've done like, I've hung out with them outside of practices and games. Like I'm in the team group chat. Like back in high school, like they would have like parties or whatever. I wouldn't get invited to the parties and just like stuff like that. But now like it's completely different. And the freshmen took a little warming up. They had to get used to me. I can kind of compare it to when back in November, my family got a puppy, and my other dog had to kind of get used to the puppy. He was like a little unsure of her and was like kind of like staying away from her a little bit. And then when he realized, oh, she's not so bad, like she could be fun, like we can play together, like that was when like he started warming up to her and getting better with her. So I compared a lot to, they weren't sure how to react to me. I feel like at this point, a lot of guys like that are a little younger than me might not have played with a lot of girls growing up because of like more women's teams like being a thing and a lot more opportunities now. So I kind of was like, all right, just let them warm up to me. And now they're all really great. Like they talk to me, like we'll hang out a little bit. Like I'll like, I have classes with some of them. So it's just different. It's a lot better than it was in high school for sure.
Gotcha. That sounds pretty interesting about kind of the dynamics that you have, and I think everybody got more mature. Sounds like
Yeah, that's what I think.
getting
Like
used to
everyone
things.
just kind of starts growing up a little bit. Like not to say there
Yeah.
isn't some immaturity. Like, we're in college. We're not like
Right.
full blown adults yet. I always say like, oh, I'm like an adult in training. Like I'm not a real adult yet.
It is a very interesting culture difference too. I can tell, like coming from Asian countries moving to Canada, like you would never think of having a lot of the co-ed sports together. It's kind of almost a no-no. Like it's almost like a culture thing. Like you would never have this happen. But when I first came,
Yeah.
even in college, I would have dormitory where I could live in the same floor as the ladies. I'm like, wait, what? That just sounds so weird, but it just worked the way it is. But that culture difference, I think, actually does change a lot of the way we think about team building. Sometimes, like I'm a lot
Oh
more
yeah.
comfortable speaking of ladies, and it's very different than what I where I grew up from.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. Like I never really thought about it that way.
Hmm. So walk me through a little bit, like when you are going through high school practicing, like what is that? How do you balance that school and the practice? Like how often do you practice every week?
So in high school, we would have, well, since I had I was playing on club teams too, like travel teams, and I was on the high school teams. I would have one practice per week per high school team. So I was on both teams. So I had two practices. And then for my travel teams, I'd have two practices. Sometimes like they would be on like the same days. So normally varsity practice was Wednesday and junior varsity was Thursday. And then luckily my schedule aligned a little bit with my club team, with my travel team. So my travel team, I would practice Tuesdays and Thursdays. So some days I'd have like two practices a day. And honestly, like it feels like it was so long ago because I'm a senior in college now. And
Yeah.
um, I don't really remember how I did it. I mean, I know I did like all right. I had a decent GPA. I think a lot of it was just like staying up late and getting my homework done. And then also like my senior year, like it was a little different. It was a different dynamic. So I had study hall that year, so I could do like work in study hall sometimes. If my study hall was before class that day, I would just like do the full class work that day for that class. But I don't recommend that or staying up too late because I think I'm still catching up on sleep from all those years of not sleeping, and especially during college too. But yeah, it's really just about like time management and prioritizing, your work and knowing I have to get this done. I need, to get the grade so I can get to college to play at that level because that's part of it too, is getting the grade so you can get in. You don't want that being something holding you back because that's something 100% in your control. Like your practice times aren't, but like that's in your control.
I I like how you started the conversation about having control. That's the next question I want to ask because I think this is very key thing they brought up is everything we do, not just the mental thing. It's like how much do we have control and how much are we dealing with what are the things that is out of our control. So I'm curious about when you were going through high school, like you said you have to do a lot of late nights, a lot of it's a lot of these decisions that you made, that I have to stay late, like I have to practice. Are these controlled by yourself or your environment? How do you create the environment for you to succeed in doing all these stuff without like so dragging, right?
Yeah, so for me, it was just something I really wanted. I wanted to play in college. I wanted to go as far with hockey as I possibly could. And I still wanted to like, that was like my biggest motivator in school. That's what I wanted to do. And
Mm.
that's like, I was like, I need to get the grade. And if I need, to get good grades to play college hockey, like that's what I'm going to do. So yeah, like part of it is like realizing you're in control of that. Like you control your grades, like you control how you spend your time and how you manage your time. Like I missed out on a lot of things growing up, like, hanging out with friends a lot and sleepovers, like going to the mall on like a Friday night because I was playing hockey instead. Like I would never change that for anything, but it's all about you need to want it bad enough. And if you just don't, if you're not willing to give up those things, that's okay. Like if you really don't want to give up those things, that's fine. Like that's your priorities, that's your life. I'm not going to judge you for that. But what I don't understand is when people are like, oh, why aren't I playing at this level? Why aren't I getting better? Like, why did I do so poorly last weekend? Like, sometimes you have to take a step back and say, hey, maybe I'm not, prioritizing or putting in that work that I need to be putting in and sacrificing some things because that's a big thing too. Is like there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. Like, I missed maybe like I don't know if you guys have these in Canada or how it works, like homecoming dances. I missed homecoming dances. I nearly
Yeah.
missed prom one year. So yeah, it's just a lot of like sacrificing. I went to maybe like two football games my entire high school career. That's like a big thing here. You go to the football games, especially when your team's
Right.
good. I went to maybe like two.
Wow.
So it's just like those things won't bother you when you know, like, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, and I'm willing to put in the work for it.
How did you find that goal that you have, and like what do you think why you can keep it for so long? Like I think the how do you get it, that part a lot of people just don't get it, like including myself. It took me a really long time for me to find something that like, oh cool, I think that's the direction I want to go. But was it always that clear that this is the direction I want to go, or you kind of take some time to do self-reflection, or whatever? Like how did you get to that stage where you're like, this is what I want to do, I'm gonna sacrifice all that for that, right?
So I guess like it started out like, so I started playing in sixth grade. That's like really when I started playing. And it was kind of like my environment a little bit because I went to a lot of camps and a lot of like tournaments where like college teams played or like college players were coaching. And I saw like how good they were. And, they talked about like their experiences like playing college hockey and how it's like really cool being able to represent like your school and still play a sport at a high level. Like, um, you get like perks, obviously, like in some respects. And, it's just a lot of fun. Like, it's just really competitive. It's fun. Like, and if you really love it, like, you have to like be good and you have to get to like a certain point in your career to be able to get to that level. So for me, it's like, oh, like that's just sounds like something I really want to do. Like it definitely built up. Like it took like maybe about like a few years, like maybe like 2 or 3 years to really get to that point. But I almost kind of always knew, I think based on my environment, like that's something I really want to do. Like I don't want to just go to school and just like go to school. That's what I feel like I do now. Like I just go to school and I can't imagine not playing hockey. I can't imagine not doing something. And this is what I love to do. I love to play the sport. So I want to keep playing and I want to keep playing for as long as I can. So I think just like seeing how much those college girls that I like had grown up like seeing and skating with occasionally like at camps, like how much they loved it. So for me, it was kind of like that's a no brainer. Like that just looks super cool and I want to do that.
That is that is something that I think for me and a lot of people I spoke with is uh we probably never had that environment that is that supportive. And I'm so glad
Yeah.
to hear from you that you're always surrounded yourself with people who are always enjoying the sports, are always very dedicated to do the next level, and inspires you a lot. And that's exactly what I feel when I came here. That ice hockey culture, I'm like, where does that feeling come from? It just built up. It's really magical. So I'm curious about like how does your are your parents very supportive? They just let you do what you want, or are there any conflict you ever had with them about pursuing this career?
So they were always like really supportive. Like my mom, like both of my parents are almost 6 years old. And so obviously like back when my parents were around like my age or like a little younger and when they were even younger than me, like girls like didn't really play sports. Like you kind of got made fun of and like if you were a girl and like it was a lot different then than it is now. So like I guess like, anybody watching like in that age range can kind of attest to that because I wasn't there. It's just kind of what I heard from like my parents and like my other family members. It was just different. So my mom always loved sports. She loved watching her brother play sports and she played softball a little bit, but she always loved ice hockey and just never like really did it. Not until I started playing, she started trying to play a little bit, which was kind of cool. But yeah, and like my dad, like I think he just wants like us doing stuff to kind of stay out of trouble. And like he's a big sports fan and they loved coming to watch me play no matter how much it killed them because it's like, being the goalie parent, that's a whole nother conversation though. Like
Right,
the
right.
goalie parent, like that's just I can't even imagine. I can't imagine what they go through. And I really appreciate them for what they do go through for me. But yeah, just like I guess to answer your question, like yeah, they've always been like really, really supportive, but kind of like both in their own ways and like for their own reasons.
That's that's really good to like. So far, I haven't heard any like really like challenging experience that you have had through your journey. You shared a little bit before the show with me about kind of the mental battle that you have between the two. Can you share with with everybody here the story that you share with me and walk us through kind of the mental battle that you have kind of
Yeah,
gone
for
through.
sure. So I've always kind of been like, ever since I started playing, I was always really kind of nervous about like, what do people think of me as a goalie? And, if I let in a goal, like people are going to be talking about me negatively and judging me. And that's always kind of something I had. And like, I would have a lot of angry outbursts, especially when I was younger. Like, like I'd kind of throw a fit when I let in a goal, or that's a little bit of an understatement. But that's something I'm proud of. And I kind of like grew out of that. But like, the feelings never totally shook. Like when I was on teams, like where I was surrounded by a lot of like supportive people, that kind of like, it kind of masked like how I was really feeling, because I had like that support and I didn't feel judged, and I just felt like I can play. Like, they kind of gave me that confidence. But when I started moving up, and it's kind of a different dynamic when you get to like AAA, like obviously it's a lot more competitive, and like some people just, they're your teammate, but you're also at times like their competition. And when I went out to Michigan my senior year of high school, I was trying out for a AAA team out there. I'd made the team, and I was going back for like a week, like midsummer, to do like a training camp and to find like who I was going to live with, because I lived with a family out there. And it was a different environment than it was out here. Like it's obviously super competitive. Like Michigan's one of those states where it's known to be like really competitive. And I was like, I thought I'd like kind of like thrive under that. But there was this like gut feeling I had where I didn't want to be 10 hours away from home. And it was my senior year of high school. It was a huge change. I just wasn't sure about it. And it really set in for me. Like the story I told you was, when I was at the last day of training camp, I think, I had to get off the ice a few minutes early. I was like, I just don't feel good. And I wasn't like feeling like myself on the ice. And once I got in the locker room, I was by myself. I just like started sobbing, and I was like shaking, and I ended up like throwing up, which none of that has like ever happened to me before up until that point. And for me, I just kind of shook it off as like, oh, you're just nervous. Like, get out of your head. Like, this is going to be fine. This is going to be really good for you. Like, this is what you wanted this whole time. Like, this is where you wanted to be. You wanted this whole time. And then, like, when I got there, actually got to Michigan and like played in the season, or started playing in season and like going to school and stuff there, like, I was really depressed. I would stay in my room at the house I was living at. Like I would not come out for the first like 2 weeks I was there, because like we didn't have school. So I didn't come out of my room. I really wasn't eating. So I wouldn't be surprised if I lost like a lot of weight or anything. But and I was just like, I guess I'm just really sad. Like I know I'm like, this is a big change, and everyone just kind of kept pushing for me to stay there. But like the entire time I was like, knew something wasn't right. And I just kind of like shook it off as like, oh, like I'm just in my own head. This is like, it's my own fault I'm feeling this way. Like I'll get over it like once I'm in school and once like I'm playing games. But the team I was with, I'm not gonna like mention the name because I'm not like here to trash talk anyone. It just wasn't like a real supportive environment. Like I wasn't supported by the people I was living with. I didn't feel totally supported by the team. I felt like, since a lot of them were all from like Michigan and I was really the only outsider, I was from, 10 hours away on the East Coast. It was like different. It was kind of a different way of life there. And I didn't feel like I fit in, and it just wasn't the same. And I wasn't happy. So after a few months, I ended up coming home. And when I came home, I was like really depressed up until I started like, I couldn't play travel hockey again out there because there wasn't a team for me to play on. And then once I kind of realized, like, it made the decision, like, okay, I'll go play juniors. Like next year, I'll take a year off of school and like put off college and go play juniors. But like, it was a really hard transition, like coming back from that. Like it took me a while to really, get that confidence back up. And like, it was not easy. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, that was a really rough time in my life. And yeah, it was weird. It was a really, just never expected for that to happen to me.
Before you step into that story, going to Michigan, was that a planned thing for you? Like you're looking forward to, I want to go to Michigan, I want to play the highest level of hockey. Is that the reason why you get there, or is there a different reason?
So basically what had happened is the AAA program in my area was not fielding a team that year for was not fielding a team that year. So I kind of freaked out, like, well, I don't want to like move down a level because I'm not going to be able to play in college. So my entire time, like my entire thinking this whole time was I have to play AAA or I'm not going to play in college. So I found pretty much any team I could, and I wanted to go to like a state where I knew like it was competitive, like, you know, the hockey out there is competitive, like we're going to play good teams, I'll get a lot of exposure. So I was just like researching teams, and I first originally wanted to try out for Honey Baked, which is like the top program in Michigan. And that was a bit of a reach, but I reached out to the coach and he actually just said, you know, hey, I know this team. He gave me the name of the team, is looking for a goalie. Here's the coach. Here's like his contact. Let's see what we can do. Like if I can help you out, because they weren't looking for goalies. Because I kind of learned that once in those programs, when you move up, like throughout the program, like you're pretty much like staying there. Like no one's leaving, and like they always have like their kids. There's very few opportunities for tryouts. So I reached out to the other coach, and initially it seemed like a really, really good situation. So I went out there, tried out. They had a goalie come back. So they were like, oh, we might not need you this year, but like, you know, if anything changes, like we'll let you know. Like we really wanted to have you here, but we had somebody come back. And then a few months later, actually on my birthday in July, they gave me a call and said, hey, she's actually not coming back. She chose not to come back. We'd really like to have you. And would you want to come out here? So it was all a very quick decision because I had tried out for other teams as well in like other states, other areas. Some, you know, some of them I didn't make because like I said, you have those goalies in the program already. You kind of just go out there to try out like without knowing that. And they already have their goalies. And I had another tryout when I got the call. So it was kind of between, do I try out for this team and risk not making it? Even though I really liked it up there. I spent my year of juniors up in like that area. So I really liked it up there. And I was like, this seems like a good situation. Like I like these people. But then I had already known I had made the team out in Michigan. So I was like, you know what? We're gonna play it safe. We're just gonna go out there. It was all about playing it safe and playing AAA hockey, which was the end goal. So that's kind of how I got there.
Would you say that the whole situation with you finding the team, going through all these, were you by yourself most of the time, or you have someone you lean on, like your parents or a coach that you have, a friend that you have, or was that a lot coming in your head?
So I definitely like leaned on my parents the most. Like I had a lot of people that were pretty upset at the fact that I left and went somewhere else. And I was also like going through like some stupid like teenager stuff over the summer. I wasn't like talking to a lot of people. I was just like so focused too on like hockey and getting on a team. I kind of like neglected people and just didn't talk to people. And a lot of people were really put off by that. So obviously that's on me. So I didn't have like a whole lot of friends, especially when I came back to high school in my area. That's a whole nother story, but that was rough. Like I really didn't have friends coming back to high school, but the only people I really leaned on were like my parents. And like I can remember like one of my cousins, like I would say my sister, but for me it was really hard to reach out to her because I knew like she had missed me a lot. And like we weren't like super super close, but my mom would always tell me like how hard it was for her that I was away. So I didn't want to make her like feel worse, so I wouldn't like talk to her very much. But like basically anybody that would really listen, I would kind of talk to. It wasn't like any specific person other than really like my parents.
Before I continue with the story, I one thing I really realized just throughout the half an hour talking with you, Taylor, it's I learn a lot, and I really appreciate I respect a lot of the fact that you're willing to be very self-reflective. You're self-aware of what was the problem was, and you're willing to admit it. And
I
you
try,
mentioned,
like
yeah,
that's a process. I haven't always been like that, but it's definitely a process and something I've had to work on myself throughout like the past
right.
couple of years.
Well, there you go. Like the amount of self-awareness that you have, even to mention that from your brain, saying, "Oh, because I didn't do this, because I didn't do that, that's why it's this." It's not about the talking part; it's the self-aware part. Because in order to talk about it, you have to have the self-awareness first. And the amount of self-awareness that you have, I think it's something that everybody can learn from, including myself and people at your age at that time having that self-awareness. it's pretty fascinating, I would say.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Going back to the story, that part, and you mentioned your parents pretty supportive to you, and I'm trying to understand why the whole throw up, the whole panic attack happens, because my initial thoughts was, wait, well, that's what you were looking for, right? That's
Yeah.
exactly, like, you want to play that level, you want to go there. Why going there? And then all of a sudden, like, you just like panic. Was it because you felt like this is the only chance that you have? I can't miss it. Just a tryout. Like, is that kind of the reason why, or how would you say that causes you that panic attack there?
I think a lot of it was, it's hard for me to explain because at the time, I didn't understand why. It wasn't up
Mm,
until I started reflecting on it more as to like, I got a little bit of a better understanding. And I still, to be honest, don't
mm,
totally know why, but I'm kind of assuming it was a little bit like what you said with this is my chance. Like, I can't mess this up. I need to be perfect. Like, I need to be on top of my game 100%. Just like, that anxiety and like putting all that pressure on myself, and also like, just like my social anxiety kind of coming into play, like how, like, what do these people think of me? Like I can't, like, make them mad or make them think like otherwise of me, that like I'm not a good goalie, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to get in college. It was all just like a big spiral effect, but just, or spiraling down. But like at the time, I didn't totally understand that. I wasn't
yeah.
totally like thinking that way. And it's weird, like even to like this day, I still don't totally understand why. And I, like I said, I think maybe even part of it could have been, I knew subconsciously that this was not the right choice for me, and maybe I should have waited for somewhere where I was more comfortable. Because I really say listen to your body. Like, we
Mm,
might not all be like psychics or whatever, but we're all like pretty intuitive. Like, listen to your gut, because you know that can tell you a lot. Like, that entire time my gut was saying like retreat, 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 but I thought it was just all in my head. And yeah, some of it definitely was, but some of it like wasn't. Like, I just knew it wasn't a good situation, and I'm pretty like good at picking up on that, on those things.
maybe you're still reflecting on it, and you mentioned at this point you still don't not sure what causes it, but maybe we can do a little bit of a brainstorming here. Like, if you
Yeah.
were if you were to go back to that situation, is there anything that you would do differently, or you would think differently, so that it things turn out a little bit easier for you?
So I think part of it was, is like, I don't like to blame like a lot of stuff on like my mental illness in particular, because
Yeah.
I see people do that and they just use it as a crutch, and I try not to do that. But like my anxiety was, not controlled at all. I hadn't been to therapy, I hadn't been on medication or whatever. Like, my anxiety was not controlled. I didn't know any like coping ways of how to, you know, acknowledge my feelings, what I was feeling, and how to kind of like talk myself down. I was just dealing with what I had and like what I knew, which was nothing. So I guess like, yeah, I guess like some of that, it's hard to say. Like, it's so weird, like, to kind of bring that back and talk about it, honestly, because it was so long ago. But my year that I played juniors, actually, there was like, it wasn't a terrible year for me. I started out a little bit slow because I kept thinking about like, the experience I had the year before out in Michigan. And here I was again. I was up in like the Boston area, or New Hampshire, but very close to Boston. And so I was very far away again, and I didn't know anybody again. It was kind of like repetitive. Like, in my head, I was like, oh my God, what if this ends up the same way? Like, was I really prepared for this? But then I actually started seeing a sports psychologist. So that helped a lot. And even when like I wasn't doing well, I started picking it up after like the first like month or two of the season. And I was actually playing like very well and doing, what I needed to do. And I felt a lot less pressure. Like, yeah, there was definitely still a lot of anxiety there. And that was kind of contributing from some other outside factors, just like a little bit of like the team chemistry played in like a little parts of that. And like, but this time I actually had like the people I could lean on. Like, I was really close with my goalie partner there, and there was another girl there I lived with. We shared a room, and she was a lot like me. Like we had a lot in common and we just got along really well. So I had like people up there and it was a lot different. So luckily for me, I kind of just like gave it that chance and I ended up doing what I wanted to do the year before, just like a year later. I got to college. That was the goal, right? So we got committed to a college.
Yeah, that's good to like. That's one thing that it really brings back to the whole reason why I started the show is it's being a goalie sometimes, especially when you're not playing like the competitive level where you might have someone you can talk to as a goalie. Like here in my level, like I'm literally just by myself. So hearing that a lot of things get better and a lot of things go smoother when you're living with your goalie buddies together and actually building that relationship and share a lot of that experience, that to me it's really the same kind of the environment I want to create here. That's and I'm very curious about the sports the psychologist that you work with. Is there anything that he does really good, that like anything that what is that main difference when you have that person to walk you through that, or to do something when psychology wise? What are some of the things that he does really well that makes you feel good?
So at the time, I was seeing a girl. She was a goalie actually. She played at Princeton and then she ended up moving. She was from Canada. She ended up moving back home and playing, I think, at like University of Ottawa or something
Mm.
like that. And so at the time, she was, I think, in a doctoral program. So she wasn't officially a sports psychologist, but she was like working towards that. So she was getting like the training and she was using like that training kind of to help me. So she would give me like, I guess, these certain like exercises to do and like stuff, like she would send them to me on the computer and be like, oh, you can do like this. And just like talking to her and having like that goalie to be able to relate to, like she played in college, like she totally gets like the aspect of,
Oh,
especially
she's a
being a
goalie as well.
female. Yeah, she was a goalie. She, I guess, yeah, she's definitely like long graduated by now. It's been like a while, but I didn't know her very well. Another a former coach I had actually connected her to me. I didn't know who she was. Luckily, like that connection happened, and I probably have some of like the old things actually, but they were like worksheets basically where you would kind of like, so a lot of it was like talk, like therapy essentially, where like I talked just like a lot and like she kind of gave me feedback, and the exercises I would send would essentially be like me reflecting and me like kind of figuring out like, okay, like where do these emotions come from, like, and how can I help myself, like what are some triggers that can help me like move down from like that point of like panicking, or like how can I center myself. So just like giving me a bunch of kind of different exercises to help me do that. And again, not everything was like for me, not everything worked, amazing for me, and it takes a lot of time. It wasn't just like overnight. I had like 4 sessions with her and was like, oh my god, I'm cured, because no, it doesn't work that way. But just you really have to work at it and you really have to do like what they tell you. Like if they're sending you like worksheets, oh, do this like once a week or after every practice or whatever it might be, do it. And then also another thing she suggested was journaling, and my goalie coach at the time too even suggested that to me, and that really helped. Like I journaled like a lot, and they're like, especially like do it, especially when you're angry, and just like write whatever you're thinking. Like, even if it's really, really mean or really, really like bad and something you would never actually say to someone, just write it down. Like, just do it. Like, you will feel a lot better. So I definitely like got those like tips and those exercises and stuff like that that were working like my brain and helping me better understand myself. So that definitely like helped.
One of the thing that I heard quite a bit, and I think it's a little bit of a myth about working with someone's professional who is mental, right? Like they feel like they might felt like they got judged, like, oh, this guy needs, or this lady has to talk with a professional to solve their mental problem. When you're first taking these kind of therapy, do you have any sort of feeling or guilt that you have to do this, or you're pretty open to it?
So at first, I really like my mom wanted to get me into it like my junior, like starting like my junior year of high school. And I was just like, no, like, I can handle this myself. Like, I don't
Right.
need help. Like, that's for people that are like, crazy. Like, I'm not crazy. And it's just like, I had all those stigmas, especially like being a goalie. Like, people will people. I actually wrote an article about this. I'll send it to you if you want to forward it to
For
people.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I essentially wrote like, people expect goalies to be inhuman when it comes to emotions. Like you don't have emotions, and you're not supposed to have emotions. And if you do, you sure as heck cannot like release any of your emotions on the ice. Like you can't talk about how you feel. You have to be like even keeled, like at all times, just like a straight line with your emotions, even though sometimes our emotions are like a wavelength of just like different, like up down, whatever it might be. Like basically there's like, I feel like a lot of people can attest to this. There's that unspoken rule in goaltending, like, oh, you can't have emotions, because once you have emotions and you show them, you're considered unstable. And then when you're unstable, you're apparently not fit for your job. So I had that assumption for like the longest time, and I was really unreceptive to therapy. It took a long time, and I didn't really start to get receptive towards it, especially, yeah, I really, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. Just everything's
That's
all
all
like
right.
kind of coming back, and like I'm thinking, and it's like all kind of making sense. Where like my junior and senior year of high school, they were just like normal therapists. They weren't like sports psychologists. Like I thought it was a waste of time. I was like, you people don't understand me. Like you don't know what I'm going through. You've never been through that yourselves. Like this is a waste of my time, because you're just gonna say, oh, do this. It's, solving this is as simple as doing this. Like, no, it's not. Like you don't understand. So for me, I hate feeling misunderstood. And I was like, you know what? This is how it's going to be with everybody. Like, this is just a waste of my time. Like, I will be okay handling it myself. And then finally, when I got to juniors and I started talking to the girl, her name was Cassie. Once I started talking to Cassie, she was a goalie. And that was perfect. Like, she could understand pretty much everything, I was going through, and like my feelings, because she's experienced a lot of those things herself, just maybe not to the extent maybe I have or whatever. I don't know everything about her background completely, because, a lot of it was just about me and like my situations and my experiences, what I was going through. But once I started talking to her, I feel like part of that is having that connection. And I didn't have that connection. So I just dismissed it like, oh, this is just not for me. But that's normal too. Like I've even heard it's normal to go through a couple therapists before you find someone good and someone you really connect to. And that's the biggest thing. Like in order to talk to someone, you have to be able to be connected to them and feel that connection.
It's very interesting. I really like you kind of break it down from, like you mentioned one thing that I really resonate a lot, exactly the connection. Like right now I feel like I'm very connected with you the way you say it, because you you make one statement that stuck in my head just real quick. It's, I hate to be misunderstood. Oh man, like that just
Oh yeah.
hit me so hard. That just when you
Oh
said, I'm like,
yeah.
that is exactly it. Like when I first started, I felt like nobody understood. Like, even my parents, they never play hockey, right? They would never, like, I would not expect them to understand me,
Oh yeah.
and they would never try to, which is fine. Just let me do what I do, right? But then when I was on the ice, it's the same thing. Like I'm the only goalie in the team. I felt like nobody's gonna understand me other than the other side of the goalie that they
Yeah,
play.
right.
So that loneliness that I had, I don't know how to express it, but it's just like I'm proud to be in my position, but I also hope that somebody else could understand this position and be willing to understand me.
Oh yeah, I totally relate to like what you just said. Like honestly too, like I said, even though like my dad played hockey and like my mom like understands sports, like my dad wasn't a goalie. So he and my mom have been very helpful, and like they've learned over the years kind of like by asking goalie coaches and kind of doing like their due diligence, like, oh, how should we go about this? And at least a little bit from what my dad knows too, like he knows a lot about hockey, because like he was a coach, like he coached me a bit like when I was growing up, and just like stuff like that. Like he knows like what he's talking about, but like he's certainly done his due diligence to like understand me a little better. But again, like you said, they've never like been in net. Like they don't do that on a daily basis. Like they don't understand like kind of what it really is to be a goalie. And a lot of people will never understand that. Like even like some of my family members, as much as I love them, like I love my family, like, like my extended family, like my aunts, my uncles, cousins, grandparents, like whatever. Like some of them have seen me play a couple times. Like as much as I love like how much they, care about me, like, and want me to succeed and, really like that, like, oh, like that's so cool, like you play hockey and like you're a goalie, like this is really cool. None of them will ever understand, and it's nothing against them, like it's really not. I'm not trying to be mean when I say that, but
Exactly.
like I totally, like I said, I totally get where you're coming from. It's like you don't understand, like you might be trying to but you just don't, and that's why it's definitely important having like that goalie connection like in your life, and being able to talk to someone and being able to bounce like ideas off of each other, and talk about your feelings and like breaking those feelings down and whatnot.
What is your kind of go-to person or go-to community, go-to group, go-to environment for these kind of topics nowadays?
So I guess like since I have another sports psychologist now, he's like local, so I can be like in person. My former one, Cassie, like she got really busy in school, and I also kind of got disconnected with her for a little bit once I started going off to college. But once I found a new sports psychologist, so I talked to him like a lot. Like it's gotten less and less because of how crazy my schedule's been the past like year, especially with COVID. And I started getting into coaching too. So I put in a lot of time with that and like my own like on ice, off ice training. But so I talked to him a lot about like, that kind of stuff. And then I also have the goalie coaches I work with. I work with Goalie Doctor that's kind of out of Philadelphia or the greater Philadelphia area. And there's two head coaches, there's Matt and Mitch. And I work with both of them, and they're both really great, and they're both people I can always kind of turn to and talk to about pretty much anything goaltending, and talking about like those feelings. And especially since Matt like played in college, he totally like understands like where I'm coming from. We actually played at the same school. He's a lot older than me. He's like 10 years older than me or whatever, but we actually played at the same school. And we both played at like NCAA level. I mean, I'm now playing at the men's club level, but being an NCAA goalie, playing juniors, like I can definitely talk to him about like some of that stuff. And like same with Mitch, like Mitch totally gets it. Like he has a kid right now playing, he's like 15 years old. He's playing like high school right now and playing like that elite hockey. So he gets it too, at least from like a lot of like that standpoint. So I feel like just like the goalie coaches, like your goalie coach should always be somebody like you feel comfortable like going to and talking to, because outside of like another goalie, they're the person that's going to get it because they've either played goalie or they've known so many goalies and have talked to so many goalies to where they're going to like pretty much understand like the feeling.
That actually inspired me quite a bit. Like I'm kind of consuming what you just said and running into my head. I'm like, how can I apply the same thought and environment into kind of any age, not just people who play really competitive? Because a lot of beer league goalies that I work with or I spoke with, they're just kind of like they're not as serious as the competitive players. Like in fact, they actually said like I want to distinguish myself from them. Like I want to be chill. I want to play hockey, but they at the same time they want to have the environment to be supportive. I think I have a very brave idea, but I don't know. I'm still kind of conceptualizing it, but we could be a goalie coach for each other. Like you said, like
Yeah.
you have the goalie coach that coaches you, but why can't we be our own coach? Like we can coach others, and you can be each other's coach. That's kind of one of the ideas that spin off from what you said here.
Yeah, like I feel like beer league goalies definitely should like be kind of supporting one another. Cause yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, some of them are not like out here like being like real competitive. They just want to have fun with it. And that's okay. Cause even as a competitive player, you should still be having fun with it. But
Yeah.
in beer league, it's definitely a lot more relaxed most of the time. If you let in like 12 goals in a game, nobody cares. It's like, oh, whatever, it's beer league. Like, who cares? Except for like those really, really competitive beer leagues. But like,
Yes.
other than that, like, there's no reason beer league goalies shouldn't be supporting each other. Even if you're on the other team, like you guys are all in like the same boat. Like a lot of us, especially a lot of them, like you don't know, like beer league can be mixed with like guys from so many different backgrounds. Like this guy could have like nearly made it to the NHL, and then this guy could have, just started playing. So we're all like kind of coming from like different backgrounds. Like beer league's just like this big, like, you know, I'm like kind of blanking on the word right now, but a big like pool of people from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. So why not like lean on each other? I think that's kind of important too. Like I get it, like, that's something I never really did. I'm like, oh, you're my competition. Like, I, don't want you tapping into like what I'm thinking and like how I deal with things and, my knowledge. I don't want you tapping in on that. But like, when you get to that point, especially beer league, it's like, why don't we all just support each other? Like, why don't we all just help each other out? Because at the end of the day, we're all here just for fun. Like, there's nothing to gain or lose from it. So just support each other.
I would explain a little bit from my own perspective in terms of beer league goalies, and like I felt like extending to what I just said was that they're a little bit of a, at least from me, it's because I started hockey so late. I felt like I wouldn't be able to speak the same language as people who have been playing the sports for a long time from the get go. Like that difference there. Do you think that there's actually a gap between how we communicate, or you're like, hey, it's just a matter of you speaking up, or we just engage each other? Is it just that, or like, what do you think about it?
I think maybe there's like a little gap because like for me too, especially like as a coach, I started working with a girls hockey program as the assistant goaltending coach, and we would run like the clinics and stuff like that. We have a clinic once a week on Thursday nights, and some of the girls were very, very new to goaltending. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm like explaining stuff to them, and they're like, "Wait, what? Like, what do you mean by that? Like what does that mean?" And some of them have not been playing very long at all. So
Mm.
it's I kind of forget. I'm like, it's been so long since I've been in your shoes. I kind of forget like what it's like in a sense. So
Right.
I think some
Right.
people, like the more advanced person, sometimes they just forget because it's been a long time, like, and like I said, they just forget what it's like to be in that other person's shoes. And then for like the younger guy, or like the guy who's not experienced, like the younger guy, whatever, they might be just kind of afraid to speak up because they're like, maybe they're thinking, oh, I don't want this, more experienced goalie to judge me. And I don't want to feel like I'm wasting their time or whatever it might be. Like maybe it's just like that self doubt. So I think it's
Yeah.
about meeting in the middle, like that more experienced goalie needs to recognize, hey, I need to take it a few steps back because, I was at this point once too, and I didn't know what any of this stuff meant or whatever, and didn't totally understand all these things and hadn't become familiar with those things until later down the line in my career. And then that less experienced goalie also needs to say, hey, like, I know it's a little intimidating, but I do need to, like speak up for myself a little bit and say, hey, I'm not as experienced as you are, but I'd really like to pick your brain, or I really want to know like how you dealt with this or what this means. Like it's about finding that middle ground because it needs to come from both people. It's not just like a one way like street.
Very well said. I love it. I love it. Like that's exactly, you're speaking off my mind right now. It's exactly the I will extend a little bit to that. Is it is really that, like, I think sometimes we judge ourselves by our skills, especially for B League goalies. We compare ourselves to the pros compared to the NHLs. Oh, we need to get the best stats. Like, in fact, I would say a lot of people like myself, we play ice hockey because of NHL, because we got inspired by like the crazy
Yeah.
saves about the NHL. Like we want to be them, but because of that, the side effect I found was that we always see ourselves like, oh yeah, I want to learn, but like, I don't know how, and then you just kind of like, what should I do? And I want to be the one who step up to in this phase. It's not about we're so far away from each other. It's more we don't have enough these kind of conversation together, and that's exactly what the Asian Goalie Show is about. And I'm so glad you kind of summarized that on your perspective, because you are kind of going towards the really competitive side, and I'm so glad you're here to share a lot of your thoughts and being open to listen to the people like myself who are not as experienced as you do.
No, like I really appreciate that. Like, especially once I started coaching, I realized kind of how much I like to help people and how much I like to, give people advice and you kind of give back what people in the past, like goalies in the past, have helped me with. Like, there have been so many goalies, and I've worked with so many goalie coaches and like college goalies and stuff from like years ago that they gave so much of their time and energy to like help me. Like, I want to be able to like also help people. And it's like, if you have a question or whatever, like do not be afraid to ask me because I will tell you and I'll tell you pretty much as honestly as possible. Like I'm pretty straightforward. You're not gonna get a lot of walking around from me.
Thank you so much, Taylor. We're about at the 1 hour dot here. What is some ways people can reach out to you if they want to kind of talk about goaltending with you?
So you can follow me on Instagram. I know Felix has my Instagram, so you can follow me on there. Or Facebook's cool too. My Facebook, it's just my name, Taylor Schwant.
Got it.
Honestly,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
just
have.
whatever social media.
Yeah, I have all the social media that will be put it on the description box. You guys can definitely find that. And Taylor, although she's very busy, but I can tell like she has been doing what she can to get out of her busy schedule, and actually even today she's here. I'm like, I really appreciative. Like I never asked her to. I try to work my time around her, but at the same time she has to work around her time to get on the show. So really appreciate that you come on, and I'm sure like there's a lot of golden nuggets throughout the whole hour here. Like I don't know like how much we get from that so far, but as the time goes, I'm sure like we'll get a lot of great like stuff just from this 1 hour conversation. And these are the message I want to spread. These are the things that I definitely want to go. And uh, so check out Taylor's Instagram, Twitter, if you Facebook, right? Get it if you want to get in touch with her. And speaking of the big announcement that I mentioned in the beginning of the show, uh, this episode is going to be the last one for season 1 of the Asian Goalie Show. I call it season 1. Like we have done 4 straight months, weekly episodes for in total of 15 episodes. This episode is the 15th. So there are a lot of learning, a lot of collaborations with a lot of awesome athletes and goalies, and I've really decided to take a step back and reflect and provide. Ultimately, I still want to provide more purposeful and impactful content in my YouTube channel for all like you, like beerly goalies out there, and I want to kind of change the format a little bit. So I'll end the season 1 of Asian Goalie Show. I'm very confident that this will be back, but I'm gonna have to kind of reflect a little bit. So that's kind of the announcement I want to make. And that being said, stay tuned on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/the Asian Goalie. That's my YouTube channel, and I will continue my weekly exclusive content over there. I will still post weekly, but it might not be the same format as we do here for a little while before I do my reflection. And of course, follow my Twitch channel. I will continue to stream to interact with you as my audience and as my best goalie buddies out there. If you have any questions, suggestions, you want to interact with a group of people like myself alongside other goalies, you can join the Discord server. I have it called the Asian Goalie Community. You can find it in the description box. And that's it. That is the wrap for season 1 of Asian Goalie Show. I appreciate everyone who has supported the show. I got so many good feedback, comments on the YouTube side of things, and thank you Taylor for sparing your precious time with us this weekend. Being the last guest, like you were like, wait, what? I didn't expect I was the last guest. But yeah, it's great. Like I've learned so much from you, so really appreciate the precious weekend time with us. So we shall see each other again. Have an absolute great weekend, everybody.
Thanks for having me on.